Welcome to Book Launch, the UK's most widely distributed books magazine for all intellectual interests. And in this broadcast, we're asking, why do we think it's okay to humiliate the poor? Why do we heap blame on the world's most vulnerable people? And how can we help them find an honourable way out of the conditions that entrap them? That's the subject of The Shame Game, and here's its author, Mary O'Hara.
When I was 10, I entered the regional disco dancing championships. I'd never been to that side of town with its big houses and manicured gardens. It was like another world. The convention centre was vast. Multicoloured lights suspended from the ceiling swept around the huge room where the competition was to be held. The wooden floor shone in a way I didn't think wood could. Groups of girls began piling in, giggling and sparkling in the most incredible outfits I'd ever laid eyes on. A posse of mothers followed the girls, all carrying little pink or powder blue coloured cases. They checked for creases, applied blusher, fixed bows and clips in their daughters' hair. I approached the long table at the front of the room, my hair still wet from the rain, where I handed over my 50p entrance fee, and a middle-aged man gave me a white, square piece of paper with the number 11 on it. He asked if I was okay in a way that made me think the man thought I was in the wrong place. It would be fine, he assured me, before patting my shoulder and turning to talk to a woman nearby, who then glanced over and shook her head slowly. A bouncy older woman in a sequined jumpsuit at the front of the room made announcements over a microphone. Girls, clucking loudly and preening, raced to the floor and took up spaces. One by one, they edged me towards the back. Mothers stared at me from the sidelines, not in a bad way, but with a look I would come soon to understand was a combination of pity and disdain. My presence seemed to make them uncomfortable. I was out of place. My eyes filled with water, but I willed the tears back. I pinned the number card on my chest and pushed out my chin as I waited for the opening beats of the music. 1, 2, 3, 4. The incident at the dance competition is the first memory I can recall of when I felt the sting of other people's pity, and when I think I realised on a visceral level that being from a poor background came with stigma attached to it. Being poor or on welfare was a source of shame. Over the years, there would be many other incidents that sharpened my understanding of the intersection of poverty, pity and shame, like realising our first home, the one I lived in until we were rehoused when I was 7 into new public housing, was nothing short of a slum. Our first house had just 2 tiny bedrooms for 8 people and was perpetually damp. Rats were so commonplace they may as well have been members of the family. A shovel was kept handy in the living room for when one appeared. There was no bathroom, indoor toilet or central heating, and the kitchen was a makeshift scullery with a plastic corrugated roof. Having a fridge or a washing machine was unimaginable. My mum kept it immaculately clean and looking as nice as possible, but there's only so much makeup you can put on a pig. As I got a bit older and my dad became unemployed, there was the realisation that claiming the dole, unemployment benefits, as my father had to do for long periods of time, was a source of humiliation, even within a community where many people were in the same situation. And there was the knowledge that relying on state assistance to get by was not something that everyone had to face, and was seen by some people as a sign of parental failure. There was the awareness, too, that while the food in our cupboards mostly met our daily needs, we had to borrow from neighbours when things got really tight, and that even though we had occasional treats, often paid for by going into debt with loan sharks, this was not how everyone lived. West Belfast, which was also one of the main flashpoints during Northern Ireland's sectarian conflict in the 1970s and 1980s, was among the most deprived areas in the whole of Western Europe. But even if I had known this, I doubt it would have made my younger self feel any better about how much we had to struggle or how much shame there was at not being able to afford what others could. I'd seen enough TV to know that there were people who were well off or rich. I knew my teachers were better off. I'd just never really been anywhere near a wealthier part of town and interacted with people who lived there. I'd never met anybody from that background in any intimate way. Like most poorer families, this is true today in Britain and America. We lived our lives in the poorer parts of town. We didn't have middle-class friends. But when I first began to understand that we were looked down upon or pitied by many more financially fortunate people, the undercurrent of shame stayed with me for a long time. Anyone who's grown up poor will have similar stories to tell. Those small or large experiences or encounters that force you to register that your family is not just lacking in material things, as hard as that may be, but that as a kid you're set apart from other children. Maybe it's your first day at a new school, when you look around and realise that the kids whose parents have jobs or better paid ones than yours do have pocket money or better clothes. Maybe a teacher tells you that the best you can hope for in life is a minimum wage job at a fast food chain, and not to set your sights too high. Perhaps it's watching a parent struggle to make sure there's enough food on the table or warmth in the room when you have a new friend round whose family don't seem to have the same financial hardships. Or maybe you don't ever ask friends to come to your house because there's nothing in the cupboard to offer them. It could be that you overheard a conversation where someone commented on how scruffy you and your siblings look, or criticised your parents for failing to take proper care of you. If you're female, you may have experienced the humiliation and discomfort during adolescence of not being able to afford sanitary products and having to improvise while spending the day fretting that it might not work. If you didn't grow up in poverty, these sorts of indignities most likely will not have affected you, and you will be unaware of the enduring impact they can have on a young person. You might never have thought much about the reasons people end up trapped by poverty or the dearth of opportunities that keep them there. If you've never lived on the breadline, it's probably difficult to grasp that for many people, no matter how hard they work at their minimum wage precarious jobs, they just never have enough to make the rent, eat nutritious food every day, or buy a much needed new pair of shoes for their kids. You might not have thought about what it feels like to have no choice but to swallow your pride and go to a food bank to stock up on essentials because you don't qualify for state assistance. Yet every single day, people all over the US and the UK live with the gross injustice that is being poor and with the humiliation of being blamed for circumstances beyond their control. It doesn't have to be this way. It really doesn't. As someone who directly benefited from the structural redistribution in the UK that followed the Second World War, including the foundation of the welfare state, affordable council housing, the National Health Service and free school meals, I know that where there is a will, we can provide a springboard to better things for the poorest among us. A fairer, more equitable society where we don't blame and shame the poor is not beyond the reach of wealthy nations like Britain and America. It's an honourable, gettable goal. For a long time in the US and the UK, two of the wealthiest yet most unequal nations on earth, the primary story told about poverty has been that it is the fault of the individual and is the result of personal flaws or bad life decisions rather than policy choices or economic inequality. If only people worked harder, if only they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps or got on their bikes, as the one-time Tory Secretary for Education Norman Tebbit once declared, they too could find a job. This book is about a shame game that is being played out against millions of the poorest people in Britain and America. It tells the story of how a pervasive, toxic narrative that shames and blames the poor has secured a stranglehold on our collective understanding of poverty. Drawing on interviews with people who have first-hand experience of poverty in both countries, this book documents how a powerful story propagated by powerful people plays a pivotal role in sustaining and justifying high levels of poverty and inequality by repeatedly misrepresenting and stigmatizing people who are poor. And this book looks at how we can alter the way we talk about and understand poverty in order to shift perceptions and to work towards building a consensus on how to tackle poverty and improve people's lives. So, stand up, stand proud, and don't play their game anymore. Read this book to educate yourself. Read this book to hear from the people who are being shamed.
That was Mary O'Hara reading from the start of her book, The Shame Game, published by Policy Press in Bristol. The book is available to buy by clicking on the link on this page.